Guys, something just happened recently. Some group of African Americans, about 300 African Americans, called a TV station to make inquiry about how to relocate to Ghana. You know, something happened in America. These three black American women came out to protest for a black American sister that the father was unalived in America, just like that. So they're looking for a place to go to. And having been that this CBS station has interviewed a lot of Americans that have traveled down to Ghana with their experiences, they decided to come down here to the TV station to make inquiry about how can they travel to Ghana, because they want a safe space. They want a place that they can be and feel safe and secure. Let's take a look at the video, then we'll be right back. Don't forget to like and share.
Hour with the story of an African country opening its arms to black Americans. Ghana's tourism minister began encouraging African Americans to move there in 2019. As Black Lives Matters protests erupted, she said, quote, "You don't have to stay where you're not wanted." Deborah Patta spent time with one American who chose to make Ghana her home.
Ghana's Elmina Castle occupies a dark place in America's history. This used to be a central trading hub where African people from across the continent were bought and sold into slavery. Now, as the U.S. continues to confront its racist past, Ghana is turning that history upside down and welcoming black Americans back home.
You know, I was living what people would consider the American dream. I was educated, professional, had friends. I was a socialite, but I never felt safe.
Sonjai Davis was the epitome of Washington cool. Connected, successful, a therapist trained to deal with emotional health, and yet she was constantly looking over her shoulder.
There is just so much unrest.
Davis believes trauma is embedded in her DNA, from the transatlantic slave trade to the Tulsa race massacre in 1921, where some of her family were displaced.
I was beginning to take an emotional and psychological toll on me.
The trauma of racism?
It's the trauma. So my immediate thought all the time was, oh my gosh, you know, what if a police officer pulls me over? Am I going to be physically safe? Am I going to come out of it alive?
Then George Floyd was murdered at the hands of a police officer, sparking global outrage that demanded this black life had to matter.
I was barely holding on. I could feel myself nearing a nervous breakdown. And that's why I made the decision that I had to get out of there.
She had visited Ghana in 2019 during the government's Year of Return campaign, marking 4 centuries after the first slave ship reached Virginia. It attracted a record number of tourists, aiming to convert visitors into residents.
George Floyd's name over there.
Head of the African Diaspora Forum, Erica Bennett. Ghana is turning that history upside down and welcoming black Americans back home.
You know, I was living what people would consider the American dream. I was educated, professional, had friends. I was a socialite, but I never felt safe.
Sonjai Davis was the epitome of Washington cool. Connected, successful, a therapist trained to deal with emotional health, and yet she was constantly looking over her shoulder.
There is just so much unrest.
Davis believes trauma is embedded in her DNA, from the transatlantic slave trade to the Tulsa race massacre in 1921, where some of her family were displaced.
I was beginning to take an emotional and psychological toll on me.
The trauma of racism?
It's the trauma. So my immediate thought all the time was, oh my gosh, you know, what if a police officer pulls me over? Am I going to be physically safe? Am I going to come out of it alive?
Then George Floyd was murdered at the hands of a police officer, sparking global outrage that demanded this black life had to matter.
I was barely holding on. I could feel myself nearing a nervous breakdown. And that's why I made the decision that I had to get out of there.
She had visited Ghana in 2019 during the government's Year of Return campaign, marking 4 centuries after the first slave ship reached Virginia. It attracted a record number of tourists, aiming to convert visitors into residents.
George Floyd's name over there.
Head of the African Diaspora Forum, Erica Bennett, said after the death of George Floyd, they were inundated with inquiries.
Every day we get at least, and this is no exaggeration, at least 300 people saying, how can we relocate to Ghana?
About 5,000 African Americans have made the trip back to Ghana and stayed.
Home is not a place. It's how you feel where you are, the feeling of belonging, the feeling of welcome, and a sense of freedom.
And so, just over a year ago, Sonjai Davis traded her DC home for that sense of freedom.
It felt like a symbol for 2020.
You know, I can't breathe, George Floyd said, and COVID, people battling, and here you are, able to breathe.
No, I'm breathing. Yeah, very much so. Okay.
Her therapy practice is now all online, and while she misses the convenience of modern American life, she's no longer looking over her shoulder.
I feel loved. I feel supported. I feel regarded. I feel like I matter. I don't feel...
Okay, so I visited the Brazil house. A very unique experience, a very unique history. Brazil to Ghana, it's a very interesting history. This is the original structure. It's still there. Look at that. This is the original structure. This is the original structure. This. That is a breathing hole. A little window. What do you think was in that room back there? That little dungeon. What do you think was back there? It's a lot of history. We hear a lot of conversation on social media about certain history doesn't exist. But my question is, how do you know? This is the original structure. Unfortunately, the conqueror gets to tell the history. Unfortunately, the victor gets to tell the history and rewrites the history. So if you are searching something up online, my question is always, who's telling the story? And we dismiss the oral stories within our communities. Met her at the Brazil house, and she is more than willing to let you know the authentic history, the link between Brazil and Ghana. And they keep trying to tell you, transatlantic slave trade was all a lie. Really? It was? It is? How do you know? Now let me try to stay balanced in my description of Ghana. Yes, it is filled with history. It's also filled with rich history. Let me say that. It's filled with rich history, positive, thought-provoking things. It also is filled with a history of violence and like any other place in the world, violence and discord and struggles and depression and this. If you look at this picture, some will see the boats in the background right here, the beautiful fishing boats made out of pure tree. They're right here carving. Hold on, let me help you. Right here. They're carving boats. Some of you might see the trash. You see the trash here? You see the trash? Again, not trying to convince you. Just telling you a story. Just telling you a story. Just telling you stories and letting you see the beautiful fishing harbor right here and trash. And this is right behind the Brazil house. Some might see the art. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Look, that's so pretty. Look at that. Some of you might see the beauty. When digesting a story, always first realize who is the author, who's telling the story, right? You always have to be cautious about what are you consuming and how do you consume it, right? Remember, it's your story to tell. It's your story to tell. The original structure. What do you see?
Right, and you are?
Adjoa, Dakoi.
Dokua. Yes, right. I mean, it's interesting that you still remember your names anyway.
Yes.
So how long have you been in Ghana, actually?
Since Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where are the places you visited so far? Do you remember any places you
We
visited?
visited so many Oh places. my goodness. We went to the Coast castle.
Okay.
The Safari Eco Park.
Okay.
Yes. The Botanical Gardens.
Okay.
Yes.
So you visited quite a number of places.
Yes.
And how is the feeling like? How do you like the place?
Yes. Every place has been a completely different experience.
And the people here are just warm and welcoming, and everyone has a smile on their face.
So you feel at home.
I feel at
Definitely.
home. Yeah.
So have you heard of places that you would want to visit? I mean, places you've not visited yet?
Life in America is not as easy as you see it. A lot of Black Americans are, they have this stereotype over there because most of these white Americans, they feel like they are not Americans enough, because of their skin color. And most of them face discrimination. Most of those Black people were just unalived, unprovoked. And that is it. Most of them are now looking for a country to go to. And they decided to come, know more about Ghana, because they've been hearing about how African Americans are migrating to Ghana, gaining citizenship, living peacefully without no problems, and they chose to come back home. When they discovered that they are Ghanaians, they chose to come back home. See, there is no place like home. As an African American, there are a lot of things that they face over there. So this is them using this opportunity to come back home, know more about the culture, know more about the lifestyle, the way of life of Ghanaians, and they are coming back home. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to like the video, share, and subscribe.